Hey, welcome, welcome. I think I got the volume correct. I want to dedicate this song to you. So, hey, how you been? All right, let's hit it. I'm gonna try and hit it quick and hit it real good. This is a thicker book from the first volume. So here we go. Chapter 1, Hollywood, California, 1979. I had no idea what Hollywood looked like up close and personal. I wondered if it looked exactly as depicted in movies and television. In my mind, Hollywood was this fantasy filled with glamorous people and fulfilled dreams. After months of listening to Bobby, Big Bro, and Tommy carry on about the beautiful scenery, I began to wonder if Hollywood, California was indeed paradise on earth. Bobby also knew how much I enjoyed growing and tending to exotic plants. I guess to make sure I did not change my mind, he convinced me those same plants grew everywhere in California and everyone planted them in their yards. Now this would be something I had to see. As I sat on the plane and imagined what California would look like, my mind began to drift. I began to imagine what it would be like to live in Hollywood. What would I say if by chance I met a star? Would I know what to say? What about when I became a star? Would this change me? Would I still be Bunny Debarge? Then there was this Soul Train. What would it be like performing on the Soul Train stage? What would I say to the host? As I grew more and more anxious, anticipating what was to come, I decided one of the first places I absolutely had to visit was the Soul Train studio. After all, I needed to see glimpses of what I believed in my heart and soul to be my true destiny. Then there was the weather. Bobby and Tommy had gotten me all excited about the warm, sunny California weather. They swore up and down the sun was always shining and the winters were always warm. Coming from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and dealing with unbearable winters, I needed to believe such a place existed where everything was not frozen over for what seemed like most of the year. Although I had grown accustomed to the frigid Michigan winters, it was never lost on me how everything around me appeared dead. The leaves had long fallen, and the naked limbs were seemingly clothed in a fresh coat of snow each day. Cars were buried under what looked like mountains of snow on tree-lined streets. Although as children it was fun to see your breath freezing in midair, as an adult you realized how painful and difficult it was to breathe in sub-zero temperatures. Of course there was the wind. The wind in Grand Rapids is quite vicious, and you would easily lose the battle as your body was viciously whipped in different directions. Here I was moving to a place where it never snowed. California felt like it was going to be a whole new world and different. Not only was I determined to fulfill my destiny, but I also desperately needed a change of scenery for more reasons than one. Leaving Grand Rapids, Michigan also meant leaving my spiritual roots and the safety and security of my second home, the church. Our humble beginning as entertainers and how the music industry worked started in the church with us singing gospel music. My brothers and I enjoyed performing in church. Through our singing, we were touching the lives of many people. It gave us joy, a sense of purpose, and revealed our destiny. Even with our small success as a local gospel singing group, I never forgot the hurt I felt when we received a rejection letter from Light Records after submitting our gospel demo tape. We don't know where to place you. Light Records felt our music, even though it was gospel music, was different, and they were correct. We were never meant to sound like other gospel groups. We had our own sound that set us apart from other gospel singers of the day. Still, those words of rejection remained an open wound for a very long time. all our hopes and dreams of becoming gospel artists were shattered. We believed in our heart God had given each of us a unique gift to share with the world. Even as our lives at home became increasingly unbearable, sharing the gift of music made us happy. As my mind relived this moment of rejection, I was overcome with a brief bout of depression. The feeling was quickly replaced with new hope as it dawned on me once again I would soon be landing in Hollywood, California. Bobby and Tommy met me and my daughters, Demia and Janae, at the airport. The children and I were so excited to see Bobby and Tommy. They were stars in their own right, but to me, their nieces, they were Uncle Bobby and Uncle Tommy. We walked over to baggage claims with our arms around each other. Even though it was not Christmas, today felt different. Here I was reunited with my brothers, along with my children being with me, in this magical place where everything looked and felt brand new. As we exited the airport, everything around us teemed with life. You could feel a spirit of happiness and excitement engulfing the city. The sun was shining brightly and the trees, unlike the barren ones in Grand Rapids, were still in full bloom. To think it was snowing when I left Michigan, yet here I was in California, stepping into summertime. I could not help but feel anticipation in the air. I looked down at my children as we made our way over to the car. Seeing the huge smiles on their faces as they held tightly to their uncle's hands made me have no regrets about my decision to move to California. A sudden rise in confidence overcame me, and I began to believe anything was possible. I could sing, write, and produce. Moving to California was necessary to achieve my dreams. All I needed was my family, and we would make it big. Oh, what hope I had, what great expectations. Once inside the car, Bobby and Tommy brought me back to reality. Eager to tell me all about the city and their experiences, they talked over each other. They both wanted to be the Hollywood expert. However, it was hard to hear what either of them had to say because they were so busy going at each other trying to make sure the other told the story correctly. It was pure comedy listening to differing versions of the exact same topic. They were continuously disputing what took place. At first, I was folded over in laughter. This was just another Bob and Tommy moment, always going at it about something. After a while, though, my brothers had gotten on my last nerve, and their banter had become insufferable. Okay, you guys, I stated, exhausted. One at a time. The intense back and forth ended, and the conversation shifted and became very informative as Bobby and Tommy discussed the politics of their music career. As I continued listening to what they were sharing, I could not help but be amazed by the highways. They were expansive. The trees off to the side of the highways were lush and beautiful. California was truly a breath of fresh air. I glanced at my brothers, who were now perfect examples of how to become successful. They both looked amazing. They were glowing and they looked like stars. The California life appeared to be treating them well. And as we were making our way to Cerritos, California, I began to have a strong sense of freedom. Suddenly it dawned on me more than anything, the fame, the stardom, Hollywood, etc. I wanted freedom. Free, I thought as my mind drifted again. As I tuned everything around me, I realized As I tuned out everything around me, I realized a huge part of me was glad my husband Tony was not with me on this journey. I had so many mixed emotions about being married to him. The freedom I craved so deeply was due to feeling trapped inside of our marriage. Now he was not here with us in California, and I realized that what had been missing from my life all this time was a sense of freedom. Being with my family in a new place gave me a new lease on life. No longer overwhelmed with shouldering a marriage, I soon became high off of life. Bobby and Tommy had a surprise. They took a detour and headed to Hollywood instead. As we exited onto Sunset Boulevard, my eyes became glued to the scenery surrounding me. I rolled down the window so I could take in the sights and sounds of the city. Skateboards zipped across the concrete. Laughter filled the air. Seeing everyone so happy was contagious. The competing conversation sounded like a crowded arena. I slowly exhaled and thought, we are going to make it happen. As we drove on, I looked at the palm trees lining the streets and was amazed at how different they looked from the trees in Grand Rapids. The cars were different too. Untouched by snow and rock salt, they glistened in the sun and were showroom ready. Most of them were convertibles. After seeing all this, I was sure this was the life I wanted. There was not one corner we passed that did not have something electrifying happening. We stopped on the corner of Sunset and Vine. There stood a tall building that belonged to First Interstate Bank. I looked at Bobby trying to understand why we had stopped. Bobby stated that the Motown offices were inside the building and took up 5 floors. He pointed out the actual floors where Motown was housed. My excitement could not be contained, and I was eager to see the inside of the building. Bobby stated he had made other plans for today, but promised to take me there soon. So off we went to Santa Monica Boulevard. And once we finally reached Santa Monica Boulevard, there were billboards plastered everywhere. The billboards were promoting upcoming movies and album releases. Only stars who were hot at the time would have their images and names on the billboards. The billboards were so huge, they nearly covered the sky. Wow, I thought to myself, I have never seen anything like this before in my life. We hopped back into the car and drove down a little farther. Bobby then pointed at another billboard. "Look, Bunny," he stated. "Who is that?" He pulled the car over to the curb. I could not believe my eyes. Right there was a billboard with a bright light shining on it. On the billboard was a picture of Switch. The image was huge and it seemed to jump out and come to life. And underneath the image were the words, "Up and coming soon on Motown Records." Motown had a billboard of the Switch album right there in Hollywood. A huge picture of my brothers was shining bright just like the other big-name stars. What a thrill to see. Big time, I thought, big time. We all stood there in awe, taking in the moment of this great accomplishment. "Look at you guys," I lovingly stared while holding back tears of joy. I was ecstatic. Like a proud mother, my mind went back to when Bobby and Tommy were little hard-headed boys. And then I thought about everything they had endured at the hands of our Father. To see how far they had come in such a short time was a very cathartic moment. My brothers had grown from little boys to grown men, and I guess sensing my emotions, Bobby felt it was time to head home to Cerritos. As he drove off, my daughters and I turned and looked out the back window at the billboard. We could not take our eyes off of it. It became smaller and smaller until it finally faded into the distance. It seemed like a dream, except it was really happening. We finally arrived at the place we would call home in Cerritos, California. We pulled into the driveway. I noticed a beautiful light brown Mexican-style stucco house. It had a huge, lush front yard with colorful flowers planted along the edges of the landscape. The other homes on the street were bigger than ours and looked like mansions in comparison. It did not matter because our home was still beautiful. And before we could make it out of the car, we were greeted by the boys, Randy, Mark, and Elle, who had been awaiting our arrival. I looked toward the house, then at each of the boys, and just as I had figured, the Debarge boys were having a party, and there was a house full of girls. Oh boy, here we go, I thought. Then again, what could I really say or do? They were good-looking boys enjoying the freedom of being on their own. I mentally dismissed their groupies while giving each of the boys a huge hug and warm kiss. "We didn't forget about you," Elle shouted. "Look, come and see the house." Once inside, I noticed the boys had instruments. It seemed that in addition to the girls and the partying, they were at least taking their music seriously. The boombox was on full blast, and I could barely make out what they were saying. My brothers showed off their respective rooms. The home still needed to be furnished. I figured we would just take a page out of our mother's book and catch a few garage sales to get the things we needed. For them to be young boys, I was very impressed how they had taken care of business. It had been a long day. Demir and Janae were exhausted, to say the least. After attending to their needs and putting my girls to sleep, I was on my way back to Hollywood with Bobby. Tommy had decided to join the boys' house party. Bobby, on the other hand, was eager to get to the studio and show me what he had been working on. He began to brag about how Mr. Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown, had showed him favor. Because Mr. Gordy liked him, Bobby said he could do just about anything he wanted in the studio. He always loved the piano. Growing up in Michigan, he spent hours upon hours practicing the piano. All his diligence had finally paid off. Bobby was now a full-fledged producer at Motown. Bobby had a sweetening session scheduled for his new song, "I Call Your Name." I would finally get to see him in action. Bobby knew exactly how he wanted his music to sound. He forewarned we would be in the studio until he got everything just right, even if it took all night. I knew Big Bro and had no problems with how long the studio session would last. The most important thing was hanging with my Big Bro. Bobby and I headed to the Motown recording studio. The sun had gone down and the city was now lit up. The nighttime brought out a different crowd of people, and they were just as eclectic as the ones I saw earlier in the day. Bobby talked about the upcoming studio session. He stated there would be a string and horn session going on. The guy orchestrating the session, Claire Fisher, was also from Grand Rapids. Bobby was very fond of Mr. Fisher. He's an older white guy and quite the musical genius. Claire went to school at Michigan Universal and studied classical music. Mr. Gordy suggested we work together. Musical geniuses work well together, Bobby proudly stated. He went on to say, "I'll introduce him to you. You'll love him. He's a great guy, very down to earth. You'll be surprised at how he relates." And once we were in the studio's parking lot, I noticed a sign on the building that read, "Motown Hitsville Recording Studio." I was finally here. Across the street, I noticed a park. "That's Poinsettia Park," Bobby said. "We go over there a lot during our breaks when we have daytime sessions. You'll see how beautiful it is in the morning because we're going to be here all night." And we entered the building, and a lady was sitting at the receptionist's desk. Bobby spoke to her as he signed us in. She returned the gesture with a warm smile. "Bobby, you're in Studio B tonight." Bobby knew where to go, and I followed close behind. I had never been in an actual recording studio. When we did our gospel demo back in Michigan, it was in the basement of someone's home. We sauntered down the hallway until we came upon a large brown door with lots of insulation. From its appearance, it looked very heavy. Bobby explained the door was insulated and heavy because it was soundproof. He then pushed the door open with ease, and I could now hear musical sounds coming from inside. And once inside, I noticed it looked a lot like the music room I had visited at the local junior college while still in Grand Rapids. There were two rooms, the room where the consoles sat and another room where the musicians sat with their instruments. Different sounds were pouring from various instruments. There were flutes being practiced on, chimes ringing for no real reason, and violins screeching as they were being fine-tuned. Behind the console board sat the largest tape player I had ever seen. Bobby explained it was the master tape. It had 24 tracks of music he had already recorded. I was in awe of everything going on around me. Bobby was amused. He introduced me to the engineer who sat behind the console, and before we could exchange pleasantries, a short gray-haired gentleman rushed into the room flustered. "Are you ready to work, Mr. Debarge?" he stated, shuffling the sheet music in his hands, trying to get them organized. He then looked over at me and extended his hand. "Hello, I'm Claire Fisher." "Bunny Debarge," I stated. "Nice to meet you. I'm Bobby's sister." Bobby looked over at Claire and said, "This is her first time here. I have my sister here with me today, and I'm ready when you are, man." And as Bobby and Mr. Fisher talked among themselves, I remember standing there feeling important because Bobby let everyone know his sister was at the studio. He even bragged to everyone, saying I was a great singer and songwriter. He ended his praise by promising everyone they would hear from his sister soon. And with Bobby preoccupied with Mr. Fisher, it was my chance to walk around and check out the place. I went to the window and observed the musicians in the music room, and I was surprised to find such a diverse group of musicians from different nationalities, age groups, and even with how they dressed. There was a music stand with sheet music in front of each musician. I could not wait to hear how each person's part would come together and was ready for the session to begin. I looked around for Bobby and Mr. Fisher. They were still engaged in conversation regarding the sheet music and trying to finalize the details. They had minor disagreements, but nothing they could not easily overcome to ensure a successful studio session. And finally, Mr. Fisher walked back into the music room and took his place in front of the group. Bobby went and sat with the engineer. The big tape began to rewind. Bobby pushed a button on the console board to talk to Mr. Fisher. "We're ready in here, Claire. We're starting from the top," Bobby stated. He was now focused and tuned to everything and everyone around him. As I took my seat next to Bobby, he did not pay me any attention. The music began to play and it sounded amazing. To me, the sound came right out of heaven. I was awestruck watching my brother, along with Mr. Fisher, create the string and horn parts for the song, "I Call Your Name." Bobby sat at the console, feeling every sound as it vibrated from the instruments, and the musicians played in perfect harmony. At first I thought he was being overly dramatic until he got up and went to take Mr. Fisher's place inside the music room. And I was trying to figure out what Bobby was doing. He had never conducted an orchestra, and to my amazement, despite him not having any formal training in classical music, Big Bro knew what he was doing. Mr. Fisher was amazed as well. He loved Bobby's energy and enthusiasm toward music, and he would always go out of his way to give Bobby whatever he needed to be creative. Everything Bobby told me about Mr. Fisher was correct. He was indeed a musical genius, and there was a definite musical chemistry between Bobby and Mr. Fisher. Time passed quickly, and when I looked at the clock, I was surprised. It was early in the morning. Just as Bobby predicted, we spent the entire night inside the studio. The session was long, but I was too hyped after witnessing my brother's musical genius. There was an old saying, "Time flies when you're having fun." Well, I had just lived this truth in the studio all night with Big Bro. Fun. What a concept, I thought to myself. Fun was not something I had experienced until this very moment. I was having fun. The most fun I ever had in life. Elle came charging out of the door with my daughters in tow. "Your husband has been calling all night. Where have you guys been?" he asked with concern in his voice. Bobby, still inside the car, popped in the cassette tape from our late night studio session. Listen to this, Elle. I did a sweetening session last night. Just like that, Elle's full attention was on listening to Bobby's music and taking notes. He handed my girls to me and jumped inside the car. My focus shifted as well, but not in the way that pleased me emotionally. The fun I felt while at the studio was fleeting, and reality set in. Although the arrival to California had been a whirlwind, and I was able to witness Bobby in all of his musical glory, I was now forced to deal with the reality haunting me from Grand Rapids. Still, I was not sure what to do or how I would face my failing marriage. I knew as a wife that I should have contacted Tony when I first arrived in California. My intentional oversight weighed on me mentally. As someone who was brought up with traditional Christian values toward marriage, I was not fulfilling my wifely duties by avoiding my husband. I thought about what I would say to justify not calling. Do I tell the truth and just let my husband know I have not felt like a wife for quite some time now? Maybe I should lay everything bare and admit I was no longer happy with our relationship. And this was not something that happened overnight. I wrestled with myself and thought about taking the easy route. Why not just go along with what my husband wanted, and perhaps I would not feel so conflicted? But I had dealt with my husband's insecurities in the past and did not want to go down this road again. My husband Tony's insecurities caused him to become very domineering and possessive to the point he would not let me out of his sight. I thought about how close I was to getting my singing career up and running and subsequently realizing my dream of becoming a star. And with his deep insecurities, Tony would become a problem and possible hindrance to my success. I decided against calling him for now. I knew Tony, and simply telling him I was with Bobby in the studio all night would not be good enough. He would make a big deal out of it, and the last thing I wanted to do was allow him to push me into another argument. I wanted to enjoy this newfound feeling of being free as a bird. I wanted to have a career and not feel as if my own husband would sabotage my success. Lastly, I wanted to have fun. The same fun I had last night in the studio watching my brother live out his childhood dream of being a star. I looked back at my own childhood, at my mother's life, and realized how her dreams had gone by the wayside due to her marriage. My mother, Ederline Debarge, dreamed of becoming a professional gospel singer. She was unable to pursue her dreams because she was a committed, submissive wife to my father, Robert Louis Debarge Sr. No, she was unable to pursue her dreams because she always had black eyes and busted lips. And who's going to watch and listen to a gospel singer with black eyes and busted lips? My father's controlling and abusive behavior stopped her dreams dead in their tracks. Exactly. I refused to go down this road and sacrifice my destiny. After my relationship with Kevin Murphy ended, I made a promise I would never put my God-given talent on the back burner for the sake of a relationship. Kevin, for all intents and purposes, had been my first love. We shared a deep spiritual connection in the beginning. However, our relationship eventually hit a sour note due to him becoming emotionally unavailable. Even though it was taught to me while growing up in the church, being a submissive wife never sat well with me. It was a form of control, and I did not want to be with someone who wanted to exercise such authority over my life. Though my marriage was suffocating for the most part, I still had feelings towards my husband, which were tender, and a heart still willing to make it work. I just did not know how to reconcile being a free spirit and staying married to Tony. The only thing left to do was voice this to Tony and stand firm in my convictions. My only issue was I simply was not ready to face my husband and risk a huge argument. The pressured thoughts morphed into anger and eventually dampened my spirit. Exhausted from traveling on top of an all-night studio session, I needed rest. Despite everything going on in Grand Rapids, I was with my brothers and my girls in beautiful sunny California. I felt at home and I felt needed. I decided dealing with Tony would simply have to wait. Therefore, I continued avoiding his calls. All right, so that was just only the first chapter, the introduction of what's to come. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time. I must go. Please remember, there is a stainless steel birdcage fund for Jumanji and Diva. Feel free to cash app Madam Whipass on the $. You see it right there? $, Madam Whipass. Cash app. And also, there's a super chat going on. So, whatever the Lord places in your heart, I greatly appreciate it. And if you don't care to donate, which is fine with me, at least hit the like button and share the video. Help a sister out some kind of way if you are enjoying this reading. Thank you so much. Peace out. Have a perfect night. See ya.